In this video, we're going to look at Elijah and his relational God. I know, the God of the Old Testament is supposed to be somewhat heartless. But this story makes the case for just the opposite. Now, just how relational is Elisha's God? Hang on. Here we go. Now, my name is Charles Yerkes, and I am with SimpleNotShallow.com, where we help you keep it simple, not shallow. So, our story picks up when the queen, Jezebel, threatens Elijah's life. And Elijah, who is a man at his breaking point, runs. Now, how do I know he's at his breaking point? Well, as we go through the story, I will point out the things that have helped me make this decision, that tell me that he was just at his wit's end. So, the queen threatens Elijah, and Elijah runs. And he runs until he finds this little shade tree out in the desert and collapses and passes out. Now, he's been criticized. He's taken flack for this. Some people say it showed an extreme lack of faith, a betrayal of God, letting an individual person scare him when he had big God on his side. Right? And yet, here's the first thing that tells me that that's not necessarily the case, that he was probably at his breaking point. The first is how God handles him. See, Elijah collapses under the shade tree, and God shows up. Doesn't grab him by the shoulder, shakes him awake and say, "How dare you?" Doesn't say, "I'm severely disappointed in you, man. We were there." Didn't say, "Don't you remember just what happened on Mount Carmel? How can you be so heartless and fickle and turn on me when we were so close to victory?" No, a heartless God could have done that. But that's not what God did. He taps Elijah on the shoulder and says, "Eat. Just eat." And then he lets Elijah fall back to sleep. Isn't that amazing? And what does he do next? God, I mean. In a little bit, he taps Elijah back on the shoulder and says, "Eat something, for the journey in front of you is too difficult for you. It's too much. Eat." How amazingly compassionate. The journey ahead of you is way too much for your ability. Eat. And then Elijah gets up and runs for 40 days and 40 nights. Do you see how deep the pain inside this man is? He couldn't stop running for 40 days. And, by the way, this is another thing that indicates God knew he was at his breaking point. When he told Elijah to eat, he did not ask him any questions. He did not ask him to speak. Elijah couldn't. He could run. Now, what brought him to this breaking point? Well, I see 5 things. I see, 1, he had been on the run for 3 years, hiding out for his life from a king who was conducting a very active manhunt. So active, he was making neighboring kingdoms swear oaths that they had not seen Elijah. This wasn't a casual looking. Next came the competition at Mount Carmel. This is when the 450 prophets of Baal, 400 prophets of another a goddess called Asherah, got together to prove that Baal was the true God and God wasn't. And, we all know the story. We know that in the end, God did show up. Baal did not. God proved that he was the one true God. The people of Israel gave up worshiping Baal, came to the one God, started worshiping God again. The prophets, the false prophets, were put to death. 400 to maybe 850 people, if the prophets of Asherah were also included in that. Then, Elijah prayed, and in answer to his prayer, he saw God sending the rain to end a very severe drought. Then we are told that God gave Elijah the energy and the strength to run ahead of a chariot all the way back to town, which was anywhere from between 16 and 30 miles. I can't get an exact distance for you, but the smallest one I've seen is 16, and it's been 30 plus on the high end. And this horse wasn't walking, that was pulling the chariot, wasn't trotting, it was racing to beat the oncoming storm. So you got a racing chariot, a racing man, more than 30 miles, 16 miles. So when they get to town, what we can see is that Elijah was a swirling mass of adrenaline and emotion. Now, the next thing, number 3, that shows me that he probably was at his breaking point. And this comes from Ezekiel and 2 Peter, and I'll list the passages below. But these passages say that God takes God takes no pleasure in the death of the wicked person. He wants everybody to come to him and rejoice. Now, since this is true of God, any individual as identified with God as Elijah was, would also not take pleasure in the death of the wicked. And between 450 and 850 people just died. So while Elijah could be super happy that God was on his way back, had come back, super happy that the people of Israel are now worshiping God, and even knowing that God's law called for the death of false prophets, and so it was fitting and just that they were put to death, he wouldn't have any problem that the law required that punishment. But at some level, that was messing with his head. That many people dying was messing with him on some level. It had to, since he was so identified with a God who does not take pleasure in the death of the wicked person. So, on top of that now, comes the fact that we are told that God gave him the energy to outrun the chariot, to run ahead of the chariot, rather. But it's interesting, once they get to town, we are not told that God revitalized him, refreshed him, or gave him a couple days to adjust and come down off of this emotional high he was riding before he was threatened. Indeed, in looking at the situation, the queen would want to know right away what had happened with all her prophets, and why the king was racing his chariot back to town. What had happened? She would want to know immediately, and in looking at the story of Ahab, I can see nothing that would tell me that he was inclined to make her wait, or even able to make her wait for that information. So, it seems to me very reasonable that he would have told her immediately upon his return. And as soon as she found out, she issued the death threat. The queen, the ruling person, or second highest ruling person in the land, issued a death threat. Now, the fifth thing that tells me that he was at his end is how human beings operate today. See, human beings have this great ability to click from one emotion to the next, just like that. At a blink of an eye, we can go from being happy to being depressed. It takes no time. And we click over at the same intensity as the emotion we were clicking from. So if we're mildly happy, we're going to be mildly upset, mildly bothered. If we're very happy, we're going to be angry. And so, if someone like Elijah, who was super pumped, super excited, God was back, the hiding was over, the rain was coming, life was going to be good once again. He was exhausted. He had emotion swirling inside of him, super excited. And then all of a sudden, he had the rug pulled out from underneath him and a bucket of ice water dumped upon him and upon his emotions. And he clicked over. Super excited, super panicking and despairing. And he did the only reasonable thing he could do. He ran. Now, it's interesting. Recently, I've even heard his symptoms here, what he was going through, being described as classic symptoms of PTSD. And that makes sense. So, now, back to God relating to his broken man. So, Elijah runs for 40 days. And by now, enough of the pain has been worked out of his system that he can slow down, stop, and hide. And he hides in that cave. Now, a heartless God, an emotionless God, a judgmental God, would have come to him and said, okay, so now it's out of your system, let's go. You better explain to me why you ran. But God didn't do that. he comes up and says, Elijah, what you doing here, man? And Elijah, who is now able to speak, lets it all come forth. I've been zealous for you. I've done everything you wanted. They've killed all your prophets. I'm the only one left. You know, I can almost hear him saying, what happened? We were back. You were back. The people were worshiping you. How was I so wrong? What how? What? What? And God says, come here, man. I have something I want to show you. And so he walks Elijah to the front of the cliff face, the opening to the cave. And when Elijah gets there, a mighty wind comes forth, tearing rocks, boulders out of the mountainside and smashing them into bits. But God was not in the wind. A little dusty. Next came an earthquake. The very roots of the mountain shook and were torn apart. But God was not in the earthquake. Next, a fire came, burning and scorching everything in its path, taking it completely out. But God was not in the fire. Very strong, very chaotic, very powerful things he had just seen, Elijah. But God was not in all that powerful destruction. And then came the sound of a gentle breeze, a gentle whisper. And God gently said to Elijah, Elijah, what you doing, man? And again, Elijah repeated the same response, though now with perhaps a little less intensity. And I see this because the powerful forces in nature do have the tendency to drain us of all emotional response, in all emotional intensity. You know, in fact, I can hear him saying, I just can't do this anymore. I just can't. In God's response, he says, you know, you're right. You've been pushed to the limit. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go and appoint 3 different men to take your place. 3 men to take his place. He says, and once we do that, they'll take it from there. Elijah says, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. And off he goes. And he does it. See, this is an amazing story of a God honoring his man. And not only did God enable him to work through his pain and help him to work through his pain, he honored him by Elijah continuing as a prophet for the next few years. See, it took a few years to appoint these people, and Elijah was still the prophet. God didn't take that away from him. And he is even further honored by God taking Elijah home without Elijah having to experience death. Only one other person in the Bible has done this, and that was Enoch. This is a great privilege and a great honor. See, God honors honest commitments, honest emotions, and honest breaking points. The relational God honors his people. A relational God in the Old Testament. Oh yeah. Well, if you like this video, please click that like and the subscribe button, and make sure to grab that little gray bell icon that pops up and tell YouTube you want to be notified each time a new video is posted. Thank you. And until next time, well, click the like, click subscribe, and I'll see you then.